So hello, everybody. Welcome again to SCORAI Consumption Conservations. And this time I'm talking with Pablo from Costa Rica. So hello, Pablo. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Valerie, of course. So my name is Pablo Evia. I am an economist based in Costa Rica, but actually I am from Bolivia, a country also in Latin America, and I work in Costa Rica since 3 years ago. I work especially in topics related to sustainable consumption and production. Actually, I'm coordinating a collaborative group that is called SCOPE, that stands for Sustainable Consumption and Production, that is funded from the EFD initiative, Environment for Development, from the University of Gothenburg. So in SCOPE, we want to generate evidence in order to change sustainable lifestyles, to change towards a pattern of consumption and production that is in line with our our planet's geophysical limits. So that is why I am here, and I thank you, Valerie, for the invitation.
So why did you get involved yourself in sustainable consumption, sustainable lifestyles? What brought you here?
Okay, so beyond my professional interest in the topic, of course, I am worried about our consumption and production. I'm talking in general, right? So I am a bit worried, not a bit, but a lot worried about for example, the waste that we are generating in our daily lives. So in addition to my professional formation as an economist, I am deeply concerned by the future that we are generating for our children. So in addition to my professional interests, I will say that it's a particular concern regarding the planet that we are getting to our children and our grandchildren, and that is why I am concerned, especially by this topic, sustainable consumption.
So who do we need to get hold of? Who are the agents of change? Who are the people who can bring about the right direction? Because if you look at all of the indicators around the world, the global indicators, we're in the wrong trajectory, we're going the wrong way. So
Yes.
who do we have to get on board? Is it you're an economist, so is it the economists? Is it the business sector? Is it government? Is it consumers, producers? Who is it, in your view, that those are the agents who we have to get involved in, and we have to work out with them how to get go to the path that's going in the right direction?
Yes, I will say that because the problem is so big, I think that everybody should be involved in the solutions, and I can talk a bit more regarding this. For example, we as a consumers, we need to change our patterns of consumption in order to generate less waste. For example, that is a change that comes from our society, but it's not only this change that we need in order to advance towards a more healthy planet, not only from the consumer side, but also from the business. For example, the business needs to have a way more friendly behavior towards the environment regarding their production. Of course, there are many layers. Maybe what I am talking about is more micro from the point of view of the consumers and the producers, but also there is a macro layer that comes from the policy making, and the policy making also needs to impulse, for example, reforms that are in line with this more sustainable consumption and production. And feeding into this policy making, we need, of course, more research regarding these more sustainable consumption and production patterns. So
is that what's happening in Costa Rica? Is that happening?
I would say, well, I am speaking as from an external point of view, because I am Bolivian. I am living in Costa Rica just 3 years, but in these 3 years, I realized that the government has had a strong view towards sustainability, and that is really important. I don't know if you have heard about the pura vida, the pure life philosophy. So that is a philosophy that is embedded in each of Costa Rican, and that is surprising me. And that is a lifestyle that involves living with that what is sufficient for you. Of course, having some limits in order to not to degrade the biodiversity. For example, here by law you are forbidden to use freely a forest that is in a land, for example, that you might possess. You cannot use that land and for example to make disappear the forest that is in it, for example, by law. And I think that is a really strong signal by the government that the citizens have adopted themselves. And I think that is really important from a policy making point of view.
How does the pura vida concept, incidentally, I visited Costa Rica, I'm very aware of that, and it's a wonderful, beautiful, lovely country and people. How does it affect the way of thinking, how people interpret that message in their daily life?
Well, as I say before, I think that Pura Vida involves a holistic point of view in terms of of how we can live well. And how we can live well, of course, involves having being out of poverty, but also not degrading our ecosystems, for example, not burning our forests or not wasting too much. So I think that concept is related with other concepts. Maybe I could mention the concept of living well, vivir bien in Latin America, that is also a focus of interest lately in Andean countries such as Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, and has the same philosophy, the concept that it's not enough to have sufficient consumption and not being poor, but also not degrading our ecosystem, because that ecosystem is also feeding us. So we are not we are not going against our environment, because it will be bad for ourselves and for our children.
Does it affect the way people think about their diet, what they eat, what they buy, then what they'll throw away or not throw away? Does it come into the children at school and have an influence about how they see what is a good life?
I think it should. I am not really involved, for example, in the educational sector, although I consider that it's really important to have embedded this type of decisions into children. And I agree that the children need to take into consideration what they consume, what they waste into their daily lives, to have more consciousness about their environment. But so the question is, I don't really know how much is deep this concept inside the education into the education of Costa Ricans, but of course it should to be sustainable in time. As I said before, maybe this concept of pura vida, pure life, is also related to the concept of living well, vivir bien, in the Andean countries. But I could say that in the Andean countries, perhaps the concept itself is not really embedded yet in education, in early stage of education. So, but here I can perceive that yes, the concept of pure life is really involved in this in their philosophy of life of Costa Ricans.
One of the characteristics of Central and South America, perhaps I'm generalizing too much, but one of the characteristics that I'm aware of is that there is a strong community, family, joint, shared experience at the time when they have leisure time, recreation time, festival time, that there is a very strong togetherness as opposed to the emphasis on individuality, especially in the United States. But the South American and Central America has somehow a different cultural attitude to that you should get together, and enjoyment and joy and happiness is not a material satisfaction so much as it is a joint experience together with other people. Is that also you do feel that also in the Costa Rican life, and is community and cultural background a part of their experience?
Yes, definitely. And maybe I could bring a specific example regarding this. There are, for example, in the rural area in Costa Rica, there are organizations that are part of the water provisioning service. So those organizations are really small. They provide service for a limited number of families in the rural areas, but those organizations are community-based. So one will say, of course, what are the incentives that bring to these people that works in these small organizations to bring a good service to their communities? And I had the opportunity to participate in some visits to these organizations that are called Salas, that are work in the rural area of Costa Rica, and those are, I would say, a success example in the water provisioning service in Latin America. I think that this sense of community, it's involved not only in leisure, for example, as you mentioned, but also in this kind of services that the community could bring to the households living in the area. And these asadas, these small communities have been really successful in offering the water and sanitation services in Costa Rica, and that I think that provides a really good example of what we could bring if we have this perspective of community instead of maybe more individualistic behavior.
Did you see that? Can you see that also in the cities and the towns, or is that rather more rural and a village life?
Yes, I would say that maybe the sense of community is stronger in the rural area, but having said that, I feel that at least in Latin America, Costa Rica, I think is not the exception. We have also this feeling of community also in towns, in cities, in relatively big cities, such as capitals. So I think that we still are gathering together to organize ourselves in some kind of activities. And that is really important also in urban settings.
And the item that seems to me to be missing, if I'm looking at what is the infrastructure that you need for sustainable lifestyles, and that the government or public service should provide it. And I look at several different items, if it's education, social services, and you cited a water supply, but the one that seems to be missing in Costa Rica is public transport. Is that a problem? Is there a problem of public transport there? And what happens in the city?
Yes, definitely. It's a huge problem, I would say. I mean, in comparison, Costa Rica is a relatively small country compared to Bolivia, for example. But the times in transport are really large. So from moving to a point crossing the capital, for example, it could take hours. So I think, and this is a thing that most Costa Ricans have told me, that there is a lack of investment in road infrastructure in the country. And I'm not sure that this is related to the official policy, for example, towards forests. So that will be something that is limiting the investment in roads. But I'm not quite sure about the reasons why there is no more infrastructure. Of course, I can understand that it's really expensive to build a road, but it's something that is definitely affecting the economy. I think a recent World Bank report have mentioned that the road infrastructure into Costa Rica is really missing. So it's preventing to increase their productivity. And as this country is I mean, it's transitioning towards a service economy. I think it's even more and more important to be more connected into this relatively small country again.
Mm-hmm. So that the road transport would enable economic development and connectivity. But what about the possibility of people managing to live well without needing to use a car? So is public transport available in San Jose, the capital, in the towns, or is that missing as well because there hasn't been sufficient investment in infrastructure for public transport, as well as a missing infrastructure for road transport?
Yes, I mean, I'm not very much aware about the public transport in San Jose because my institute, CATI, is based in a rural setting in Turrialba that is 2 hours away from San Jose. I would say that the public transportation service here works better in my own place, for example. So that is a good thing already. But regarding a more I mean, more habited settings, for example, the capital, when the number of users is way more large, I think that the infrastructure of transport is really lacking. So for example, I think there are plans to rehabilitate the train, for example, passengers train in the capital. That right now it functions, but it's very limited. But I think this, I mean, the use of these modalities of transport, I think it's really useful, and it should be like a massive transport, like such as trains, instead of private cars, for example, right? So in addition to that, I will say that here in the rural areas, I had experience of traveling also to the north of the country. There are really good infrastructure in the rural areas. So for example, the local roads are really good. The water system works good, fine. As I told you before, electricity is also really stable, and other technology and information communication services are working well. Education is really fine, and health is also really fine here in Costa Rica. So it goes towards this pure life philosophy, I think.
When I see the indicators, I see it. I see Costa Rica has a high HDI,
Yes.
which is very good. I mean, it's showing that education is good, medical care is good, life expectancy is high, people are happy, they like
Yes.
their living there. I'm not sure that Bolivia is so happy, but
Oh,
Costa
no.
Rica is definitely reporting that people are happily living there, and they seem to be living well with a good level of public services, social services, medical education, as we're saying. So if we're looking across and seeing, do we have the infrastructures in place for promoting a sustainable lifestyle? Definitely some of them are in place in Costa Rica. The big missing one, I think, as we've mentioned, is the one about transportation and public transportation. That is missing, and obviously there is a need. But on the other hand, Costa Rica also has a relatively low ecological footprint per capita. So obviously the policy about Pura Vida and looking after the ecological services, that's obviously working well. So, you know, in a way, I feel we have to look at Costa Rica more carefully. I was wondering, you know, which country around the world, or countries, or cities, or communities, or something, not
Yes.
rural, because that's rather different. But if we can look at major centers of population, where are their models? Where are the places which we could say, you know, they're going in the right direction. Why don't we learn from them?
Yes.
Is there, you know, a city or a location in Costa Rica, and you would say, yes, Costa Rica in general is a good example, and the government does have a policies in place, perhaps not all of them. But would you say there is a specific a city, town, and you say, you know, take a look at this one. This is a good place. This is where people are wanting to go. This is where people want to live. This is providing a good life.
Well, actually, here in Costa Rica, I'm not sure. I think this is a national sentiment of pure life, of pura vida. Of course, I will say that this is there are some concerns regarding this. I mean, the quality of life, for example, that in areas which are subject to a lot of tourism. So tourism is a really important pillar of the Costa Rican economy, but we need these touristic activities to be also sustainable. So I have heard regarding some complaints that in some places of the country, there are so much tourism activities that I mean this philosophy of pure life has started to fall apart. But in general, I will say that this is a national sentiment of Pura Vida, and I will not identify a really specific example in the country in which this is more important than in other.
Okay, but you know, it's certainly an example that needs to be followed up. What and let's take a question from you and ask you, in global SCORAI and the network that we have between scholars and researchers and practitioners around the world. What are the questions, what are the issues that you would like to put on the table, that you would like to see discussed more in the SCORAI network?
Okay, that is a really important question, and I will say that I'm thinking about this almost all of my time. From an academic point of view, because, well, I am a researcher involved in those kind of topics, but maybe more specifically, we would like to figure out what are the agents of change, or what interventions do we need in order to sustain or even to impulse a sustainable lifestyle or sustainable consumption and production patterns. So, as I said before, I consider that it comes from both external and internal perspectives. External will be, for example, a policy, like in the case of Costa Rica. internal could be changing ourselves, our view regarding how much harm we are doing to the environment, to the biodiversity, and that it will be really important, but we need to know the mechanisms, and that involves a lot of research. And another thing that maybe I would like to mention is that the reconcile the fact that while some countries have a really high environmental footprint, those countries that have a relatively low environmental footprint, for example, Bolivia, are most affected by the consequences of global warming and climate change. But yet, we are also in need of growing. So, but that also involves, I mean, in our traditional economic point of view, to degrade our ecosystems, for example, by exploiting natural resources. So we need, I think, more research regarding what does growth without harming biodiversity means, and what are the channels towards achieving this. And I think those are really important topics in my view.
Okay, so thank you. So we'll try to pick them up and put them as questions to the SCORAI network, and arouse discussion around the subjects which are important to you and are important to everybody. So thank you very much, Pablo, for coming on board and for making the time for the interview. And I wish you well in your work in Costa Rica, and maybe you will also be able to help Bolivia too. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Valerie. Have a good day too.